My 911 still reinvasive. I heard about it. I heard he's trying to it's been tested. It's been a lot of what they rotates. I notice about these in every system. Maybe they could go in between all those panels with that kind of construction there. Get together before you. Actually, I'll make this okay. Okay, all right, all right. Just a bit. Yeah.
It could go either way, I think. Is there much we can do?
Is that okay?
Well, we can make some simple recommendations to go back and maybe they'll listen.
Okay, you good? Okay. Yep. Do too.
Chuck. Hey.
How are you, man?
Good.
These fields had a lot of ruts in them before, and I've seen them holding water back. They like containing right on the pond. Well, went up by a little electric substation, north and across the highway. I looked at it before this. All had substations. Thanks, it's in here, it's top, something else. Any of the gates that they some more.
Yeah, we're fine.
Coming out, isn't it?
Just running down on your neighbor.
Oh, yeah, we'll see.
What I really appreciate about it,
We'll send something.
everybody is an daughter, and I'm never still.
That's probably not good. It'll work for real long.
Let's see which way it goes. I'm watching where I'm standing.
All right, thank you. Making sure with everything being shown.
Here.
She recorded it. Just so you know.
Well, I would have clipped it to the beginning anyway. Yeah.
Okay.
Someone singing that under it. There, so probably wish they had fire. Okay, big fires. Oh, that's about the sheriff. No, I don't want it. Go ahead. I have nothing to say. If at all possible, be like.
It's on.
Yep.
Here's the red. Be careful what I say.
So this is what we're getting.
Send it over towards me. Yeah, I heard you.
Rex.
Careful, they didn't say anything. My message.
I'm just looking here.
Oh, IDs. Let's bring it down.
I don't get both.
I'd like to call this Grant Area Plan Commission special meeting. Solar panels to order. Would everybody please silence your phone before we get started? I'd like to call the order to Pleasant Legion. You ready? I can focus. Turn everybody's microphones to your way. Brenda, give us roll call.
Bothwell,
Here.
Frankel,
Here.
Reedy,
Here.
Cottle,
Here.
House,
Here.
Hedrick, Hicks,
Here.
Knuckles, Todd,
Here.
Wright,
Here.
Atkins,
Here.
Maynard.
Here. The next regular meeting will be at 7 PM in the council chamber, September the 12th, 2022. At this, we'll open discussions on solar in Grant County. I'm going to let the people for solar speak first. If you signed up, please come up, state your name. Because I'm going to let the people for solar speak first. Anybody for solar that wants to speak? Step up to the mic if you want to speak. Sign in and tell,
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Wells with Hoosiers for Renewables. Hoosiers for Renewables is a statewide education and advocacy organization that promotes renewable energy and the opportunities that it provides for healthy communities and healthy economies. Renewable energy projects, specifically solar, will allow Grant County residents to preserve and protect local farms while also meeting the clean power needs of the 21st century advanced energy economy. In addition to work at the state and federal level to make this clean power transition happen, this transition is a priority for utility companies, including those that power Grant County. For example, Indiana Michigan Power, or AEP, has issued a request for proposals in early 2022 to obtain approximately 800 megawatts of wind resources and 500 megawatts of solar resources. With this important context in mind, the setbacks, as recommended by the commissioners, could make a critical difference in the ability to bring development of solar energy projects in Grant County and the economic benefits that come along with them. Looking at the 300-foot setbacks in the current draft, these are a little high over the average. IU model solar ordinance suggests 150-foot setbacks. Purdue Extension from their ordinance survey determined that 200 feet from neighboring structures and 50 feet from property lines is appropriate, or is the median rather. And Senate Bill 411, which was passed by our General Assembly, suggests default standards for solar projects at 50 feet from property lines and 200 feet from non-participating landowners. Looking at some previous recommendations from this particular body, I want to talk about property value concerns. I appreciate the concerns of neighboring property owners, but there is no data, none, to suggest that neighboring properties in rural areas lose value due to solar development. While thinking about the research on property values, there are a few things to consider, including vegetative screening to protect the aesthetic viewshed of neighboring property owners, and also keep in mind that solar is an interim use during which time the land can rest. It's not a parking lot and it's not an industrial development. I think we really need to step back also and consider the importance of landowner property rights. These developments are a viable income diversification method for landowners and their heirs. People should be able to do what they want on their land. Again, an owner's ordinance will prevent large-scale solar development, closing the door to economic development opportunity for Grant County. Hoosiers for Renewables is happy to share more information on potential changes or potential language in the ordinance that allow for solar development, support property rights, and respect neighbor concerns. Yeah. I am not. I live in Indianapolis and I represent a statewide organization, and we provide education on renewable energy development in all 92 counties.
Okay, so you were employed then by those persons, right?
Hoosiers
You
for
live
Renewables.
outside and you are employed by,
That's accurate, yes.
yeah, okay, fine. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
thank you.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else for solar like to speak?
My name is Trina Radabush. I'm with GeneX Solar. We've been engaged with the,
You want to sign in before we look at it?
so I was saying, we've been engaged with the Grant County residents, with the county itself for more than a year, evaluating whether a project may be viable to bring forward in the community. I appreciate all of the listening, all of the questions, all of the dialogue that's happened over the last year. And I do hope that we can see the development and adoption of an ordinance that would allow projects to be brought forward and evaluated on their unique merits. I think we can all agree that we have the same end goal in mind. We want to contribute to a healthy and prosperous Grant County. We want that as well. Thanks.
Again, question, are you a resident of Grant County?
I'm also a resident of Marion County, but we are looking to do business in Grant County.
Yeah.
Anybody else for solar like to speak? Sign in, tell us your name.
turn that up a little bit. Good evening to the board. My name is Tyler Oakes. I'm an attorney with Bose McKinney and Evans in Indianapolis. I'm an Indianapolis resident as well. I'm here on behalf of my client, which is BNRG Energy. BNRG currently has leases in place to lease parts of Grant County with the intent of putting some solar farms in the county. Excuse me. My client currently obviously has a vested interest. They've already signed up for the leases. They're under contract and they're ready to go. And then this has come up. So we've been fairly invested in this process. We spoke with people in the community, spoke with some of you, been to a lot of these meetings and read a lot. So I appreciate the time that the board's put in, that the community's put in. This is obviously a very serious topic. My focus tonight is more so not advocating one way or the other. We're obviously very pro-solar. That's why I'm here. But just addressing some of the concerns that we had with the ordinance of itself, the way it's written. I came from Tippecanoe County originally. I was a kind of a Lafayette attorney. I specialized in land use. I read a lot of solar ordinances across the state. I think I have a pretty good barometer on where I'm at. Even draft 4, which is, I believe, the draft that the commissioners had sent back to the APC for consideration tonight, is still, I would consider on the state average, more solar restrictive than a lot of the counties around the state. Obviously, if you compare it to a county like Adams County, it doesn't go as far restrictive as they do, but it's still rather restrictive. And the 2 points that I really want to get on the record, especially for my client, that we wanted to address. First off, as has already been stated, so I won't go too deep into it, the setbacks we feel are still overly burdensome. I believe in Ryan's report, the state average was something along the lines of 200 feet-ish for non-participating dwellings. This one is at 300. So we would argue that it's still fairly restrictive on that side. More importantly, the thing we'd like to address is the permitting fees. So if you look at residential or a small commercial, which is defined in the ordinance as under 10 acres, it is based on a per acre price, with fees staying relatively low. When we get to that 10 acre threshold, they switched the calculation from acres to megawatts. And a lot of these farms can be pretty high in megawatts, and it's a pretty significant fee. So 125 megawatt farm, which is not a huge farm. I would say it's a pretty standard commercial farm. You're looking at about $135,000 in fees. Now, Indiana law and case law specifically has stated that when you're going to have kind of a bump like that, there needs to be some sort of, I guess, explanation for why we're switching over that analysis. And, you know, when I look at it, and we've seen solar companies before, and I understand that the APC is going to incur a significant cost when it's reviewing these solar plans, everything from road usage. So you may bring a consultant in who knows solar and is an expert at it. You can rack up fees pretty quickly. I'd be pretty hard pressed to find where you can justify $135,000 to review one of these applications. So we would just kind of like to put that on the record and hope that the commissioners look over this ordinance. Throughout the ordinance, there's some inconsistencies in terms of words are used as defined terms, but they're not defined anywhere in the ordinance. There are words we just don't have definitions on. We talk a lot about the landscaping, which, you know, my client is more than happy to provide ample landscaping to make sure that a solar farm put in Grant County looks really aesthetically pleasing. But there's kind of contradictions. There says to be, I think, year-round blooming plants, things like that, that I think just kind of need to be cleaned up. So I hope that the area plan staff and the commissioner can take some time, or commissioners, excuse me, can take some time to kind of review some of those inconsistencies. I'd be happy to talk with anybody about them and hopefully get those reviewed. In closing, just kind of want to reiterate what has been said so far. The only proof that I've seen, and I've read a decent amount on land values being hurt, was a study done in the Massachusetts area, which is the #2 most popular dense state in the country. If you read that study, it specifically stated that we should not hold this study accountable to non-popular dense areas, which I would consider rural Grant County to fall under that category. We believe this is going to be fantastic for Grant County. There's a study done in Illinois where 63% of tax revenue from the solar taxes went to the school district in Illinois. The Illinois school districts in 19 or 20 brought in about $26 million. We think this is going to be a great asset. And I know my client is hoping that we can come a compromise and really do what's best for Grant County here and kind of, rising tide lifts all ships. So thank you for your time.
May I ask, who is your client that you represent?
Yeah, BNRG Energy.
Okay, so you're representing the solar companies then.
Yes, they're a solar company. We have,
Thank you.
land under contract to put solar farms now.
Mr. Maynard?
Can you repeat that again? Who are you with?
BNRG.
BNRG.
Correct.
Does that stand for something?
No, that's that's just there. I've never really asked them on it.
Just a couple things. So you say you're under contract with landowners, correct?
Correct.
And the contracts that you have, how long are those good for?
To be honest with you, I was not brought in during the negotiation process, so I couldn't tell you how long those leases go for. There's other solar developers here who may be better suited to answer those types of questions, but I can't tell you how long the leases go for.
Okay. When it comes to, if you've already got them under contract and we come up with an ordinance, how long will it be before you put a shovel in the ground?
Again, that's going to be a question for the developer.
I mean, these are things that we're wanting to know.
Sure. And my client would be happy to answer those for you. If you would like to speak with them directly, I can make sure to arrange that.
Yeah. I talked to some developers and stuff, and some are saying 2029 or 2029 is when they're planning on, hopefully, if they meet all the gates that they got to go through to make this thing happen. Which, can you kind of get into that? Because I think you kind of talked a little bit about that when, can you take us through the process? You being the attorney for your client.
Yeah.
Can you take us through the process of what needs to happen before a shovel goes in the ground?
So before shovel goes in the ground, and again, I want to caveat this: I'm not a solar developer. I don't develop the farms. I just have a rough idea with the process. So of course, I'm not going to be able to hold my client to any sort of timeline. Assuming an ordinance would be passed here at that point, and again, it depends on what the ordinance language would say. But as it is now, we would go through the process of working with Ryan and the Area Plan Commission to get concurrently do a zoning overlay so that the land we currently have would be allowed to have a solar farm there. And at the same time, we'd submit a development plan that would outline exactly what the solar farm would look like and how it would go. So that process takes, again, it just depends. Could be, I guess, as quick as 45 days, but this is a pretty lengthy process. And a lot of times in my past, I don't really do solar farms. I do plan developments for apartment complexes, honestly, most of the time. But there's a lot of back and forth on that. So that process can be extended as long as the area plan wants to go until staff is comfortable with the plan development submission. So even assuming that goes on the short end, you're still looking at, well, you have to bring in solar panels, you have to bring in the machinery, and I'm certainly no expert on how all that works. But my understanding is to get all that here, to get it built, to have people construct it. I think 5 years for a solar farm on standard is fair, and that's with an ordinance put in place. So I would say if this ordinance got passed tomorrow, even with us having land under contract, I think my client would tell you they'd be pretty surprised if they were able to put one on ground before 2027.
And so the question I would have then, I keep on hearing the word queue, in the queue. Are you guys in the queue?
I don't know the answer.
Don't know what
to that.
what the queue is. Maybe one of the other solar companies
Yeah,
can.
the solar companies are going to be.
Information.
Yeah, we've spoken, and the solar companies are going to be much better for a lot of these more, I would call them technical questions.
Okay.
If you have legal questions, I'm happy to ask, or just on general solar, but any of the technicalities, I'm going to have to defer to one of the solar developers who are going to know much more than I would.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, I couldn't answer more.
You're okay.
All right. Thank you all.
They have to lean further into the speakers. Everything is set where it is. Anything starts squeaking.
Yeah.
Hello? Is that any better? I'm closer to the microphone. I'm quite a bit shorter. So I think that helps. I'm Dalton Carr. I'm a developer. I represent Apex Clean Energy. Some of those questions might have been better directed at me. It's not quite loud enough.
Cameras are not working.
We still okay, or should I wait?
Trying to get the camera to work for people on the line. There you go.
Good to go? Okay, great. You can see me again. Great. Steve, that was one of your questions on timeline. You know, these projects do take quite a bit of time. Ordinance is one of the first few things we need, right? So we've got our interest in the community, our interest in the area, which can only be furthered once we understand how the county is going to deal with solar. Once we have an answer on an ordinance, there's so much work that has to be done, quite a bit of money that has to be spent to advance these projects, to vet them, and to make sure we've studied every aspect that we need to. So for example, while we do, I think, as other developers have properties engaged, properties that are participating within each of these solar projects, pending a workable ordinance, we need to carry out years of environmental and engineering study. We need to carry through mature design work and engagement with engineering firms that are going to do more mature design, and then also, get boots on the ground for our EPC work. That's much later. There's a lot of work that goes into it even before we submit an application to the county, pending whatever the requirements are going to be. Following tentative receipt of a certificate from the county or ability to construct a project, we not only have to finance the projects, guarantee offtake on the grid itself, we have to enlist the hundreds of construction folks and management firms that are going to be involved with the project, and get the project moving. So it takes years for all of this to come along, for these projects to truly mature. So that's why when we're talking about 2027 or 2029, that's all realistic. There's a lot of work between now and having projects on the ground. High level note, the comment I was going to make, and I'll take some questions too if you have some. It's going to be, I just want to be sure we keep focus with, what the discussion is today. We're talking about an ordinance draft, and we're here to determine what is reasonable. That's the APC's role here. And I just wanted to offer just a brief comment, which is, draft 4, the prior draft was one arrived at after, about a year of hard work on the part of the APC and on developers and on the community. We found it to be a middle of the road ordinance, one that we don't absolutely love, but one that renders development possible. This Adams County ordinance is not the same. It does clearly seem drafted to discourage development. That's what it did in Adams County. That's what it would do here. So I just want to make sure that's clear. And pending a workable ordinance, we'll look forward to the county's review on the merits of each project, not today, but in years to come. So that's something we hope to advance in this county, is these solar projects, and you're going to review them case by case, I would assume. But outside of that, I'm happy to take whatever questions you guys might have on the development side.
So if an ordinance is out in the field, say whenever this is signed off by the commissioners, when does the solar company, in other words, that's law at that time. So anything that is already scheduled in the queue, and again, I'm trying to figure out this in the queue thing. Okay. So if you can kind of address that for me, I'd appreciate it. So everybody knows. Because we can amend ordinances, any ordinance that we have. I'm just trying to figure out what that looks like and when we are tied in to a company, whether that's in the queue or whether that's some other terminology that solar companies use that would be grandfathered into something that was out there before we made any amendments.
Okay. So first, the queue. For a project to inject power onto the grid, the interconnection system operator needs to approve that injection of power onto the grid. Their review is now taking absolutely forever. And so when we talk about projects entering the queue, it means we're submitting an application to the grid operator to be reviewed, for them to let us know, what sort of upgrades need to happen, and we pay for those, for the line to absorb new power, if at all. And then finally, they'll grant us the ability to inject said power, and so then we can go ahead and build the project. That's only one aspect of permitting of these projects. Obviously, you have the transmission side. The grid operator needs to give us the green light. Environmental, all state and federal agencies need to give us the green light. And then here locally, the county needs to give us the go-ahead via the permitting process. So that's only one aspect, but it's certainly the most lengthy. For Apex's project, Chapel Pike Solar, we have not entered the queue. Or sorry, we did, but we're going to go ahead and withdraw that filing. We're going to re-enter the queue, and it won't receive its approval from PJM until 2026. So once we have that, it's going to be some time even beyond there to get this project totally complete. So it's going to take some time for the grid operator to review our project, just like it will other developers. Was there a second part of that question?
Well, still looking for the answer for my question. So when
grandfathering, you're
yes.
talking about grandfathering.
So when you're doing, because I know there's a lot of costs for you guys. I don't think you want to do that for the next 2 years, and all of a sudden we're amending ordinance,
Right.
and all of a sudden you come up with something that you possibly couldn't live with at that time, and then you decide, nope, we're not going to do this. So I guess my question is, when is the determination to pull the trigger on the project?
Yeah.
And use the current ordinance that's in place, if that makes sense.
As a non-attorney, but as someone who's submitted quite a few applications to local governments, I would assume it is going to be at the time of submittal of an application to the APC, to the county, whichever for the first gating body is going to be. That is the ordinance we're working with, and any subsequent change, I would imagine, doesn't affect that application which already been submitted. The transmission queue filing application is entirely separate, I would assume, from what the county decides to do here. However, once we are already within the county's approval process, I would assume any changes there are a bit more complicated. At least that's what we would work for on the development side. We want to make sure we're up to date on the way the county's reviewing projects, that we have all the information you're looking for at the time we're submitting. And there may be a case, even written within the ordinance, if you want to request more information or more specification from a project, that's something that's not uncommon. But if say, like you're suggesting, if say the rules were flipped, following submittal of an application, you might be looking for an entirely different design and an entirely different project than the company was considering.
Okay, thank you.
Question, do you receive feedback from the queue before you submit the application to the APC?
Not necessarily.
The application to the APC could come before you get feedback from the queue.
Yes, it could. It could. Now that certainly would be a risk on the part of any developer, right? So that's a big black box.
Have you done that before?
We've never had it take this long with the grid operator, and so we haven't at Apex. We might consider doing that in the near future, just given it's taking. It used to take around 2 years for the grid operator to review a case, a queue filing, and now it's taking more like 4 years, which is a considerable amount of time when we're talking about these developments. We certainly ideally wouldn't want to, because there are a lot of questions we'd like to have answered by the grid operator. But at this point also, you've got great modeling you can do on your own. And a number of engineering consultants do the same kind of work the grid operators do to give you a really close idea of what you're going to be looking at. And really the answer that they give us is how much money we're going to owe the grid operator in order to put this power on the grid.
You have land under contract in Grant County at this time?
Yes.
one question. Just to clarify, even if you have a favorable ordinance in Grant County, that does not mean there would be a project, potentially.
Correct.
So we'd have to go through all the steps. Everything would have to be favorable for you to move forward at every step, every point of the way.
That's
Correct?
correct. Yeah. Yeah. So at every juncture, you're right. There are so many different hoops a project needs to jump through for the project to be built. And so this is one of many things that need
It's
to
fair
be
to say
assessed.
favorable ordinance only gives you the opportunity to look at coming into this area.
Yes, it's certainly not an approval of a project. It is letting us know whether or not development's possible. Then we do the array of items that make up development of these projects. That's right.
Can you walk us through the gates?
Sure.
If you could walk us through the gates so everybody kind of understands timeline
Sure.
of what all you have to do and all the hoops you have to go through to make this thing happen.
Okay. Okay, I'll do my best. If I miss something, I'm sorry to other developers in the room. There's a lot of work. So initial interest. We do grid evaluations on a micro level to identify where there's capacity on a line. It's more rare than you'd think. It's more like a needle in a haystack where you have capacity on a line that you don't have to build 50 miles of transmission line like you would if you're building a nuclear plant or something like that. And so we find those areas of capacity. We have to situate them near open farm ground where folks want to participate in a solar farm. It's the only way these work is if you can find a cohort of majority folks who want to participate in a given area. Otherwise, you don't have enough participants. You don't have enough ground to use. So that's the first step. Identify the location, ensure there's interest, talk with folks for a year or more, and effectively establish where that site can be. Then we work with the county. And this is some of these kind of overlap depending on what's going on, and it's clearly overlapping now. We're working with you guys to establish an ordinance to understand the ground rules of how solar is going to be treated in the county. Once that ordinance is established, just like the gentleman mentioned before, we'll take that back to our own modeling systems and understand what does this do to our project? Do we need more or less property involved? Does our site still work? Following that, we have some assurance that there's going to be a system in place where solar is not necessarily approved then and there, but it is possible, just like we were talking about. Once we know it's possible, there's an ordinance where solar is workable, we'll begin our study work. So effectively, we've got to have our land participating. That's going to be part of the project. And we start to understand what's under the ground. What does drainage look like in an area? Are there any archaeological resources locally? What sort of wildlife do we have out there? We start coordinating with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and any state agencies that are going to have interest in projects like this. And that's considering things like tree clearing, if it's at all necessary. That's considering crossing of wetland areas or avoidance of wetland areas. It's considering things like screening and also what's planted underneath the panels. We work with agencies to figure out the answers to those questions. And it takes a really long time to work with agencies, I'm sure you guys know. Once we have what we believe to be a good design with all those considerations taken care of, we'll submit an application to the county. And so that may be 3-4 years down the line from ordinance approval, for Apex at least. Once we have all of that work done and the county begins reviewing, there's going to be a considerable amount of back and forth, I would imagine. You asking questions, you wanting more information, different types of information. You may want to consult with the experts who put together that information too. And so I think that's even part of Draft 4's ordinances is heavy consultation with the company and everyone we've worked with. Pending approval by the county, let's say that's 4 years from now or 5 years from now, we then look to say, okay, we've got a project that's approved. We're continuing to work with the grid operator, maybe. We're continuing to work with the state and federal wildlife agencies. And we start to figure out how we're getting this project online. Who's going to be managing this construction process? What's the delivery timeline of panels and steel? There's a lot of work that goes into that end too. So say that's an additional 1 year. And then we start construction. And construction could generally go from about 12 to 18 months. Could be more or less depending on how catastrophic weather can be. Every year is different. but it's a lengthy process. And so I guess I don't want to shield that. It does take so much time. There's so many different gates, not just local approval, but approval from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, approval from the grid operator. A lot of different faces and agencies we have to work with. And I guess just to circle back on that, the very first approval comes from our own host landowners. That's important to say too. There are occasions where you enter an area and you just don't have that interest, whether it's folks who are farming, with pivot irrigation and they don't like the idea of having to change things up, or it's just not going to work with solar. We found that within our project area, we have enough folks who want to participate that this makes a lot of sense.
Okay with you.
Thank you, guys.
Anybody else want to speak for solar?
Good evening. My name's Emily Williams, and it's nice to be back before you all again. I also come from Indianapolis, and I've worked actually in Grant County for a number of years, so it's nice to be back before this body and back in Grant County. But I just wanted to come up and say thank you so much for the conversations that me and my colleague Trina have been able to have over the past year and a half or so. It's been really wonderful to be in this crowd, just to hear the concerns, understandably, and questions that these folks have. So it better informs what our project could look like if there's such an opportunity here in Grant County. Like other companies here, we do have some landowners in the county that are that we have worked with on leases. And as you might understand, it's a bit intimidating to enter a room like this. So they've chosen, not to speak as much publicly, but I would encourage you, if you would like an opportunity to speak with us or them, please let us know, and we might be able to get an opportunity if that's something that they're also comfortable with. But we just want to respect their concerns here as well. And also, just because a picture's worth 1,000 words, and I will show this to the folks too, but I would just wanted to bring this picture because this is what a GeneX owned asset, a GeneX owned GeneX developed solar facility looks like. This solar facility is on flat terrain, much like we have here. And the visual of this picture is taken 300 feet back from the solar panels with screening about 1 year in after construction. So I just think it's a really nice visual and a real visual because if you look at it, and I'll keep it around in case people want to look at it, but you really can't see the solar facility behind there with proper screening. So I just wanted to bring that to the table because it's more than I could ever just say. So again, thank you, and we appreciate the continued conversations. I'll have this over at the table. Happy to answer any questions.
Anybody else for solar like to talk? Anybody else for solar like to talk? If nobody else wants to talk, we'll close for solar. We will now let the people who's against solar come up one at a time, sign in, say what you want to say.
Dennis Carter. I live on South Wheeling Pike, out where these things are going. My big concern today, I've been listening to this for 6 months. I haven't said anything. I've just been sitting back and I've been listening. My house is right across from one of these already leased solar farms. The owner of that farm lives in Delaware County. He don't even live in Grant County. Most of the ground in Grant County or in Jefferson Township that's under lease, they don't live in Grant County. But we want to talk about economics. I seen an email the other day from somebody on the Economic Development Board or something that was out there wanting people to come out for this deal about all that, this economic development. Well, I done a little figuring today. $600 an acre to put out a corn crop, not counting equipment, labor, that kind of thing. $250, $300 an acre for beans. Somebody told me the other day they wanted 4,000 acres in Grant County. That's $2 million. Do your own math. If they get 4,000 acres, 600 and 250 to 300, that's $2 million. Now, how much money are you going to make off these things? I heard last year when Delaware County was having all their trouble, Westdale School Corporation found out where their townships, where all them are going, they ain't going to get nothing. Delaware County's going to get money, but Westdale School Corporation ain't going to get a dime. So if you want to talk about money, that's what this seems to be all about, is how much money Grant County is going to make off of this deal. I don't see where it's at. Nobody has yet to tell me what kind of money Grant County is going to make off of this. But I know what kind of money that Co-Alliance and Matthews Feed and Grain and the Case IH dealer and TTG and Swayze, I know what kind of money they're going to make off of it, off of the farm ground. And I'm pretty sure that once this 4,000 acre goes out of production, it'll never be farmed again. Because when the government money runs out that's supporting all these solar companies, they're going to do just like Solyndra. They're going to file bankruptcy and they're going to take their profits and they're going to run. And we're going to be left with the mess. Now, if I'm wrong, I could be, but just watching things as they happen and watching the government work and how in bed this green energy thing is, I'd say the odds are pretty good before it's all over. Grant County is going to take one. And Steve and I talked here not too long ago. He said he drove down to Modoc and looked at that one down there and looked pretty nice. And all this green stuff, you know, they planted, he said a third of them trees were dead. Because they're using, ashravardas or whatever, something like that. Whatever they are, they don't grow in Indiana, but that's what they're using to cover up the fences so we don't have to look at them. But they don't live, they die. And I think he said a third of the trees were dead down there. So you guys, I mean, I know there's a lot of things here about building an ordinance, but you're all talking about economy and how much money we're going to make. Somebody better sit down and start telling us where this money's coming from. Thank you.
Hi, Cale Grindle. I am from Grant County. First, I want to ask if, thank you. Did anybody happen to notice where the pro solar people are from? You're not from here. This isn't your home. You're not from here, though. We're not talking about putting solar panels in your backyard. You're talking about putting solar panels in our backyard. But we'll leave it at that. I'm not here to speak necessarily to the APC. I believe most of you guys have the best for our county in mind. I'm here to speak to the people in this room, and thank you, Steve, for having the guts to actually show up tonight and listen to us. I would like to remind everyone here that county commissioners are an elected position, meaning that they are supposed to represent us. That means they work for us, not the, I would say out of state, but at least out of county solar companies. You have a duty to vote how your constituents want, and by the look of this crowd, I think you know which direction they lean. I'm a small and beginning farmer. I've only been farming for 7 years. I come from nothing. I'm first generation farmer. I've built, a relatively small farm by myself. By taking precious farmland out of production that directly affects my future, a 30-year contract, I assume it's 30 years, for these panels not only affects my future, but that of the next generation of farmers as well. Has anybody watched the news lately? Everybody's talking about food shortages and how farmers will need to feed an ever-growing population. How are we farmers supposed to do that when we lose the most essential part of food production, the ground? Nobody's been able to tell me that either. Speaking of future, I mean, no disrespect to any APC or commissioners, but frankly, you guys are old. Sorry. Some of you won't be around in 30 years to deal with the physical and environmental aftermath of these poor decisions. You know who will be? Me, my child, and everyone else who has to live near these installations. I'm going to single out Mr. Bardsley here. He lives in a neighborhood in Marion. That neighborhood is in an HOA. What's important about that? He gets to live securely knowing that his neighbors can't make stupid decisions that negatively affect his property value. This seems awfully hypocritical to me, seeing how he's the one making decisions for others that will absolutely affect property values in a negative way. He gets that protection, we don't. All three of the commissioners live in towns. I know some of you live kind of close to the edges of towns. But as such, their ill-advised desires to bring solar panels has zero effect on their views. They won't have to live near them. They won't have to commute by them. They won't be affected whatsoever by their decision. The rest of us will. So here's what I'm proposing: a moratorium to further study solar. With a potential 30-year decision, we should absolutely get this right the first time. And doing it in just a couple months is not long enough to really get the idea of how this will affect us. Any commissioner or politician that votes for solar should immediately be financially audited and investigated for bribery and or corruption. Any commissioner that votes yes will be primaried in the next election to ensure that they don't have the power to ruin this county again. If nobody else wants to and somebody else wants to run a campaign for me, I'll primary them. We need the future of Grant County making decisions, not the past. Remember, we are a republic. We vote for people who represent us. If our elected leaders do not represent us, then we have a patriotic duty to remove and replace these politicians. Unfortunately for us, it's no longer acceptable to tar and feather politicians anymore. Thank you.
Mr. Maynard, I'd like to address one thing.
Okay.
This is the second time I've been called out on lining pockets, and I'm not going to put up with it. You can talk all you want, but my integrity is not for sale. So I'd appreciate anybody else that's going to do that tonight not do that, because it's not for sale. And neither, I don't believe, is Mr. Burton's or Mr. Bardsley's. I can speak on me, and it's not for sale. So I'd appreciate that. Be kind, be nice. You can take shots at me if you want. I'll probably get up and walk. That's where I'm at. I'll sit here all night long and listen to people talk about their land. I appreciate that very much. You're a young farmer. I want to see you succeed. 4,000 out of 190,000 tillable acres, I don't think is a lot of acreage. When I traveled over to Modoc and I went down that field, and I traveled 36 for miles and miles and miles and miles, and all I saw was corn and beans. Then I came up to the solar field. So that's what I'm trying to get in my mind, is how big this thing is. But don't ever take a shot at me on my integrity.
That's exactly the kind of comment that we need to hear from our elected leaders, that you guys are actually for us and protect us and not be bought out by these kind of people. That's what we need to hear.
And that's where I'm at. And you got to remember, I don't know how many's here, maybe 200? I don't listen to a politician. I always say there's more people. But how many do you think's here? 200? Would that be a good number? Probably. Okay. I got 66,000 people in the county that I'm representing. It's not 200 people. 66,000. So depending upon how much money, and money is an issue in this whole thing. We just had a company come to us and going to spend $500 million in our community. Okay, it's public record. Going to spend $500 million, but they asked for a 20-year, 100% tax abatement. So where's tax dollars going to come from? So that's what we're trying to figure out is, as a commissioner, I want to make sure everybody's taxes can stay as low as they possibly can. This is outside money coming in. Yes, it is outside money. I've heard that several different times. Is anybody here going to put in that kind of money into our county? I don't know. If somebody is out here, I'm more than willing to talk to them. So hang on. Okay. So we can go all night and have people talking from you can't come on up and talk to the mic if you want to afterwards. But it's one of those things where me as a commissioner, I got to take a look at every facet of money coming into our community to make sure we're offsetting the taxes that we could possibly lose by either factories leaving. And do I think that was the right thing to do for this particular factory for us? Yes, I do.
So can I respond to that?
Yes.
As Mr. Mormon said, with the farmers who are contracted for this that live in Delaware County, where are those taxes going to go?
Whoever owns that ground, those taxes are going to come in here.
Also, I would like to say, you say 4,000 acres out of 190,000 acres aren't very much. As a small farmer, I'd like you to come with me to start talking to landowners to rent some more ground and tell me that 4,000 acres isn't very much. Because a lot of these farmers can tell you that that is a very significant amount of farmland.
Okay. Thank you.
I didn't mean to call you out.
You did.
Next person who wants to talk against solar, please step up. Next person wants to talk. Who's coming up?
Like Randy's coming.
You move it.
I am Andy Ellis, and I am against these developments. I am Fairmount, Indiana. I have spoken many times up here about them. And I will be the first to tell you that when I first got involved, it was strictly an economic thing. Because I agree with Danny, I haven't yet to see the dollars and cents associated with it, and there are no jobs. I mean, we're not looking at jobs. The place you're talking about, which we both know where it's at, there's 900 to 1,000 people that work there every single day, and they take paychecks home and they help feed their families. And I think that that's important to us to make sure we bring jobs to Grant County. It's very important for us all. And anyway, before I get off on that tangent, I wanted to start by thanking the APC for giving us an opportunity to speak. And I genuinely mean that, because we've had opportunities where we weren't able to speak. We've been working on this, I think, collaboratively now for months. And I believe genuinely that this group here has listened to what the folks have had to say. And in addition, I want to thank you for taking the time these months to listen, craft, and approved a draft 7 that incorporated the community's concerns. Now, I'd be the first to tell you it probably wasn't perfect, but I think that one of the important things is this group here was willing to sit and listen and trying to come up with something that we could work with. And I thought that was important, and it got approved and it got sent to the commissioners 7-1.
So, I mean, it was overwhelmingly approved by this body here, and I genuinely thank you for doing that. It's not easy work to do. Unfortunately, the entire ordinance was rejected. I mean, it wasn't modified. They didn't pick out points of concerns, which we've heard there were points of concerns inside. It was draft number 7. Draft number 7 did have some legal binding language in it, which I think most of us supported. The one lawyer was up there, the gentleman over there talked about draft 4 has inconsistencies in it that didn't make sense to him and needed to be addressed. Well, as a group here, we kind of knew that when when they were piecemealing draft 4 together. It's also kind of important to note that draft 4 really wasn't done by this group. Draft 4 was primarily done as a result of a solar summit, which was primarily people within the community, economic and commissioners, but draft 4 really wasn't developed by the Area Plan Commission. And it definitely wasn't done with the input of all these folks here that are concerned. I don't understand why they didn't trust you guys with all the work you've done, because candidly, that's what you're appointed to do. So you did your job, you sent it forward, and I mean, it was just rejected. I mean, and really without a whole lot of feedback. So now we're kind of got ourselves, what I've been saying, in the deep end of the pool here, trying to work our way through this. And Steve, I'm not going to sit here and try to insult your integrity. That is not my intent. But when the ordinance was sent back, replaced, I wouldn't even say that sent back, it was replaced in its entirety. The things that were totally eliminated from the ordinance are what people hear. And I know we're all saying it. I know you're tired of hearing us say the same thing, but because we all have the same concerns. So how do we contain the destruction of thousands of acres of fertile farm ground? 4,000 is still thousands of acres of fertile farm ground. It's square miles. You know, there was an attempt here to try using setbacks or something to try to not make it so dense so that it didn't just come in and consume an area. And so people have barbed wire all the way around their house. That was the intent. There was never an intent. The ordinance was put together to try to protect people, but still leave the door open for solar development. Not against all solar. We just prefer rooftop solar, brownfield solar, distribution. We certainly weren't out to attack IWU and Taylor. I think some of us were offended the way that was thrown at us, because we appreciate those universities here in Grant County, and we're here to promote academia. But they're talking 40, 50 acres. That's not what we're talking here when you're talking solar power plants. I mean, these things are huge. So other things that were just completely eliminated from the ordinance when draft 4 was sent back was property value protection. I mean, it's not there. And I'm going to steal somebody's line. The comment is there's no data to support that there's any loss of value. Well, then why not go ahead and write it in the ordinance? If they don't have anything to lose, then why not put it in the ordinance? Setbacks. We talked about setbacks, and that's something that's thrown in our face all the time, that excessive setback. Now they're saying 300 feet is too much. But draft 4 reduced the setbacks by nearly 80%. 80%. There's no compromise there. There's no trying to work with the people here you're trying to represent. It just hacked them. And basically, a lot of people live in rural areas. If their house is centered in the middle of their property, 250 feet of that setback is going to be in their yard. So it's basically, this stuff's going to be right along their property line. So we've really tried hard to try to get some compromise, and we're not seeing any. We're not seeing any. The other thing that really concerns most of us, and it should concern Steve, concern you, is why is the zoning board written out of the ordinance? Why do they not have any approving in the permitting process. They were totally eliminated by something called planned unit development, where they're trying to just basically maneuver around having to follow the rules. So I think that's a genuine concern. And then obviously the environmental impact of these large scale developments, there's nothing in there to protect it. I mean, recycling, gone. You know, what happens when these things go bad? When he's got them 30 years from now and they're deteriorating in his backyard. There's no effort in draft 4 to try to address that stuff. So, Steve, I guess I'm picking on you a little bit. I'm looking at you.
You're fine. You're good.
But one of the main reasons is because you did replace somebody. And Ron, he did vote to support draft number 7. So you've come in, you're on a steep learning curve. We get that. And I think most of us that were at the commissioners meeting when you came to your first one, it was a breath of fresh air to hear you say, hey, I want to listen. I want to learn. I want to figure out how do we get this right. And so it was important to us. And then we saw an opportunity to try to figure out how do we handle something that's going to affect generations. So if you recall, you sent out a thing requesting top 10 concerns. Said, hey, anybody and everybody send the top 10 concerns, and we'll see what we need to do to address them. So I skinnied mine down to 6, if you recall. So I sent you 6 of my concerns, and to your credit, you responded back to me quickly. He thanked me, appreciated the time that I put into it, and also assured me that the issue would be addressed. So that's kind of that's my message today. My message is that this needs to be fixed. And just by approving draft 4 the way it is today, puts us in a bad way. I mean, it's poorly crafted, it's bad language, and it clearly favors this table right here. So it's important for us to try to, I know you got 66,000 people, but they all couldn't be here. I invited them, they couldn't make it. But it is important for us to think about every single one of them. And most of them, and I know you kind of snickered at me one time because it was in my backyard. I did find out it's close to me. But I did not know it at the time when I started speaking here. At the time, I was just as concerned about my neighbors as I was about myself. And I still am. So draft 4 doesn't address the concerns, doesn't address the destruction of farm ground, property values, setbacks, zoning, environmental. It doesn't address any of those. I know it's not easy. None of us thought it would be easy, but it's worth doing right. And so I urge the APC to reject draft 4, find a way to work and find compromise. And I do agree that I recommend a short moratorium, considering we're in the deep end of the pool right now, and we don't have time, I don't think, to do it correctly unless we do something different. Just adopting draft number 4 and thinking we're going to fix it later, that's not going to work. So anyway, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Mr. Maynard? Mr. Maynard? Mr. Maynard? Can I? Oh, okay. I think this might be a time for either Mr. Maynard or Mr. Persinger to kind of share with us where this ordinance is from what Andy just stated.
Sure. I mean, the only thing on the agenda tonight is this commission's approval or disapproval, what the Grant County Commissioners have sent back to you. So, I mean, that's,
but evidently the audience doesn't know that. So can you just kind of go through that?
the process, it's been a long process. So it was initiated, a public hearing was conducted by the Area Plan Commission.
Yeah, Mike.
It's been months and months process. Ryan's been in charge of, I don't know, what, 8 drafts. There has been a development
a public hearing. The statutory process has been that you guys sent a recommendation, a proposed ordinance. The commissioners considered that within the time frame, and this is what has now. You need to approve or disapprove. Well, let me tell you the statutory language. Yeah, approve or disapprove the ordinance in front of you. That is the only option. The amendment, the commissioners exercise their right. All zoning authority rests exclusively with the legislative body. That is not just the commissioners, that is town boards who are under the jurisdiction of the area plan. As you know, the area plan commission is just a recommending body. So the commissioners are certainly in their rights of what they did. It is now back to you guys since they amended it and did not take your recommendation of the ordinance. So tonight, you approve or disapprove, or if you take no action or get no quorum on action, then the ordinance is adopted as submitted back by the commissioners. If you do not, if you disapprove, the commissioners have to go one more step and approve the ordinance they submitted back again within 45 days. If the commissioners do not do that, then you default back to the ordinance that you guys submitted them. So there's only two options now. There's no amendments left. The only two options are the commissioner's ordinance or your ordinance. And you guys are a recommending body, and the commissioners or legislative bodies are the approving body. So, and I think the deadline is Friday. Is that correct, Rex? That's why the meeting is tonight. So if no action is taken by this body tonight, then the ordinance would be, the commission ordinance would be adopted and would be the, you know, the ordinance for the unincorporated areas of Grant County.
And so just so I understand, because I'm looking at it both ways. Okay. I'm trying to, and I want to make sure everybody knows, what that is. So, and the reason I brought that up was because, Mr. Ellis, you know, said what he did at the end, that he would recommend, you know, 7. Well, that's, you can't do that at this point, correct?
Well,
As a body?
7, I think, is what the ordinance you guys sent, was what the area plan commission, correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan. There's two, those are the only things in play. There's no more right to amend either ordinance.
So they can send 7 back to us.
Well, they disapprove if you guys don't take, if the commissioners don't take any action within 45 days, then 7 would be the ordinance. If you do take action within 45 days, I mean, it's it's the commissioner's decision. There's only two options. Commissioner's ordinance or APC ordinance, if we label it that way.
Okay.
No other amendments on either ordinance. You guys, the commissioners had the option to amend. They're the only ones that have the option to amend, which was exercised, and that's what's up for proposal tonight.
It's only on draft 4, though.
Yeah, correct. Correct.
So we're saying yes or no to draft 4.
You're saying
no
approve or disapprove.
Right.
If no action is taken,
Then it goes back to the commission.
That's what I wanted to make
if
sure.
you disapprove.
You
All right.
got 45 days. Bring it up.
You may not have that time, though. You understand that, correct? Because if we, I'm just saying, to clarify what he was saying, if we reject it, it still goes back to the commissioners to make a decision. Am I correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Fully support
moratorium were to be enacted, who can do that?
Well, I mean, that's a different subject that's open. Obviously, that's not any authority this board has. I mean,
Okay, it would
if
be
there's any
commission.
discretion, it's the legislative authority. And I want to be more broad because it's more just the commissioners. There's, as a lot of you are members of town boards, you know, you have discretion. Your jurisdictions are smaller, but each, you know, whether it's Jonesboro, Van Buren, Sweetser, Fairmount, Matthews still are under the jurisdiction of the area plan. So that, I mean, this is going to have to be addressed as there as well.
But isn't it true that the commissioners can make amendments to an ordinance at any point?
You can make a zoning ordinance has a different statutory structure. So there's a process to an amendment to a zoning structure. And this is where we are. This is amendment to the zoning. So, I mean, once this has been a long process, it's basically the same process again. If the area plan commission has the authority to bring up a proposed amendment as well, that the legislative body considers.
So any amendments that the commissioners would consider would have to be generated from this board first.
No, not necessarily. They can do so themselves. So any legislative body can propose an amendment, and or you, the APC, can propose amendment to a zoning ordinance.
So if, at this point where we are is whether we approve or whether we deny, it makes relatively no difference. It goes back to the commissioners and they can, of course, accept it if we approve it. If we reject it, it still is in their hand. They just need to reaffirm that.
Correct.
4 is.
With no right to amend further.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. So that's where we are at this point. How long has this board understood that? How many of us guys understood what it is that Steve just brought up? Yeah, okay, so one of us apparently understood that.
Wait, which one are you talking about?
I'm talking about the process that we're in. I did not know that we were at a dead end, that this was a final kind of step and that we had no control. I don't think any of these folks out here realized.
And that's why I wanted to bring this up,
I know, Steve. That's what.
Mr. Bothwell. I really do. Because I found that out and after the fact as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we've been here for a long, long time, and I would think that either our attorney or Mr. Malat probably knew about this a long time ago. I don't know how much long. Ryan, you've been aware of this approval process?
I've sent this out probably 5 times. It's been in packets. I know Kyle's emailed it.
Okay.
I
But
actually
it's never
highlighted
really
it
been
even.
specified.
That's when I got it. And again, I'm a latecomer.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden,
I'm not, but I'm a latecomer too.
Yeah.
That's what it comes out.
Yeah.
May I speak, Mr. President?
Go ahead.
So since I was president of the board through majority of this, and I got a lot of kickback because I said, well, the commissioners are probably not going to agree with this. Commissioners are probably not going to agree with this. But there's so much sentiment to put in such tight restrictions with not bending, and this is where it's led us to. The night that we came in and we reelected a new president, congratulations. And then we had the Adams County draft ordinance with Grant County name in place of all the spots. With no discussion, we accepted it. We didn't even review it. That night when we came in, hopefully we would have sat down, taken all the inputs. Yes, we got drafts. They were drafts to come down and discuss. Because the other thing that was so detrimental to us as a group, we had just barely a quorum or never a quorum, but we still took public input. So a lot of the towns, like Jonesboro, because of situations. They weren't here to voice their opinion. Or Matthews or Fairmount. So not everybody got a full shot at putting in their input as far as what they thought was best for their town. So that night, at least my intentions was, we should have sat down as a board. Okay, we're saying we want a restriction at 1320 or whatever it was. Draft 4 shows it at 250, 300. Is there any compromise here, guys? Because you know this isn't going to fly. We didn't even talk about it. Didn't even talk about it. So now that's why we're at a rock and a hard place. A lot of valid things. It was, in my opinion, it was so one-sided that we don't want them at all. But apparently we got about 4 clusters out there of farmers that are willing to do it. A large enough area to make their, at least the case that they will look and pursue if they can. So that's all I have to say is we blew it. You know, we did not, as a board here, discuss after we got a lot of input on, yes, the commissioners did a lot of the development ahead of time through months of things, and then they gave it to us to review. And that's what we were doing, getting the public input. So give my time back.
Well, I'd like to say something about that. Yeah, at the time we were discussing it, we was told this is what the commissioners want. This is what, we're not supposed to be listening to the commissioner. We take their advice as a grain, and we look and we work with the business or whatever it is coming in, and we listen to the people. And like he said, these towns and cities didn't have the, yes, they did. They got their representatives here, and they should have been talking to their reps that's representing them and tell them how they feel. If they didn't, shame me on them. As chairman, I'm going to say that because they had the right to talk to their reps and tell them how they felt. And if they didn't, that was on them. Want to speak? Speak. Because sign in.
I just want to clarify something. I'm Deb Kane. Okay. From what I hear Mr. Persinger say, you're not in a rock and a hard place tonight. You're not. You can deny this. You can deny it. Okay? You're not in a rock and a hard place. You deny this, the commissioner's ordinance, then they have 45 days. Is that correct? They have 45 days to respond. If they do not respond, it goes back to draft 7, which everybody out here wants. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Please sign in.
I did the first time.
He's been there.
I asked when this thing started,
Get closer to mine.
I'm lost. I asked when this thing started that because I have understand that 90% of the solar panels are made in communist China. And I asked about child labor and slaves. And I got this, was given this by Mr. Malott. And all this is a stupid mission statement. The only thing on here, the next to the last paragraph says what they do is rate their companies as unlikely, period, unlikely to use child slave labor. It doesn't say anything in here at all about child labor. The only thing I learned when I got this is UL means unlikely.
It's United.
No, unlikely is what it says right here, the papers you gave me. Now, I can't believe that Grant County is going to spend our farm ground and put solar panels made by a Chinese company. I can't believe it. Why would we want to do that? They're buying our farmland right now. They hate us. And we want to put their damn solar panels on our property? Why? Why don't we try something? Why don't we have everybody in this room, like the lady says, they're here, people that want the solar panels. Let's have them stand up. If they're already standing, they can raise their hands. I want to know how many of them are here. I don't care who they are. I want to know how many there are. Let's do it. Okay? You guys can vote too. Everybody in this room that wants the solar panels, I want to see your hand or stand up. Okay, you got 60,000 people to worry about. Take this, 200, not one of them's here. What's that? Calculate that out. How many people in Grant County want these solar panels? Not very many, I don't think.
Name's Jason White from Upland. Talked numerous times here. Just a little bit on the, sounds like we don't think we have any place to go. A few of us here tonight, we were in Delaware County, kind of same thing. Commissioners were going to do what they wanted to do. We had to hire a lawyer. And when it got to that moment, they listened to them and put a moratorium in, but it came all the way down to that last meeting with commissioners. And a moratorium was put in place because the board kind of knew that maybe they wasn't ready for it. Maybe they need to think it over. But some decisions were made pretty quick that we need to jump on board. So that's kind of how that went in place. It wasn't that their backs are going against the wall. The commissioners are going to do what they want. That's when it got put in place at that last meeting, and we got a 1-year moratorium. That doesn't say that they're never going to do solar. It just give them a year to make sure they did it right. I tried to bring that to this board that, you know, don't be the first one. You got other counties that are made some bad decisions. I understand that the future, we got to look for different avenues. I understand why they're looking at Indiana. We got 2 grid systems in Indiana. They don't care about us. It has nothing to do that our energy is going to get cheaper. It's a way to feed the grid. Like I've talked before, I've worked at substations. It may be 4,000 acres. Probably not. 5-10 years, I guarantee it's 10, 14,000. They got to build a new substation where these people have signed up for acres. That substation will not be built just for the amount of acres that are signed up right now. It will be built to be able to accept more panels down the road. I have seed customers up north in Pulaski County. I was up there with them. The fences are all built. Most of the landowners up there are upset because they're not getting their big money. They're getting $39 an acre. They've been told 2 to 3 years by China. That's how far the panels are out. So there's still a lot of uncertainties. What they want to talk to you about, they haven't got everything. It's not running smooth like we expect it to. So I farm, seed dealership, treat seed. I spend money in Grant County, just like every other farmer does here. So when it comes down to revenue, what they're promising,
don't know. I pay property taxes. Everything's prorated. Gets down to a certain level, that's all I pay. So I would imagine on their equipment, it'll be structured somehow that it will hit a flat fee years down the road. So it might be big money at the beginning, but 7, 10 years down the road, how much county money are they actually going to get out of the panels? And one question I had for you, your picture, is that from Indiana? Where's your where's Gen X based? No, where's Gen X based? Right. I understand, but your picture's from North Carolina and your company's from North Carolina. Right, but your company is from North Carolina, so naturally it's going to be beautiful. Just like when I put in substations and I put them in next to a nice housing division, we'd spend more money to make it look beautiful. But the ones out in the country, we didn't spend that kind of money. I know, but it's close. It's where you guys are based, so I understand you guys are in North, but it's in North Carolina. But it's in North Carolina, is what I'm saying. That's okay. Well, I've done substation. Right. I've done substations and okay. I've done substations in nice areas. I've done them out in rural. And we spend lots of money in landscaping, nice bushes, nice trees, nice flowers, keep the landowners happy, the houses around it. Out in the country, they got a fence. They got stuff. We didn't maintain it. That wasn't part of the package. So I just asked for a moratorium. It's coming to that. I know you guys got a big decision to make. You got 66,000 people to sit here and think about, but it's not affecting 66,000 people. It's going to affect a lot of people down the road. We're not going to be able to keep up with production with food. It's just, it's a big decision. So I asked for a moratorium.
My name is Jackie Sheets. I live in southern Grant County. You guys got to reject this 4. We all wanted 7, ordinance 7. It has what these people want. We're not the average people. Okay. You talking average this and average that. We're not the average people. We don't live in the city. We don't want city stuff in our country. I want the setback to be far away. If we have to have this solar, I want it to be as far away from me as possible. I don't want it out my front door, my back door. I don't want it around my house in any direction. It's very upsetting. Why would you take out productive farm ground? Like another gentleman said, there's not going to be any food left. This is how we grow our food. This is how we live. You can't grow food. You can't feed your livestock. If you can't feed your livestock, you're not going to feed the people. What are you going to do? We got a war going on in Ukraine. There's going to be a global food shortage. What are you going to do? Where are we going with that? Do we want to? Are we here to satisfy China? Because China wants to take over the world, and they're working pretty hard at it. But we don't want China here. We don't want China's panels. We don't want China's trash that's left over when they up and leave. How are these things when they go out of commission? What are they doing with them? I've seen pictures out in California. Fields just trash. They just left it. They're not recyclable. They're saying they are, but they're not. Not really. They're going into landfills. We got enough stuff going into landfills. Do not approve 4. Reject it. Please. You've got all these people here who are telling you they want 7. That's what we all agreed on before. And then all of a sudden it's back to 4. We don't want 4. We want 7. Please. Whatever it takes to get back to 7, that's where we want to go. I could stand here all night and talk, but I'm not going to. We've been here long enough. Please reject 4.
Got to show the rules. Yeah. Started.
Yeah. Yeah. You got 4 minutes to speak and let us know your name.
We can.
And from now on, board, we cannot look at this. We can set it aside. You can look at it later. Because this was given late, so tonight, set it aside. You can look at it later.
Hey, Rex, could you explain that? Yeah. For people, those that.
What we do is we have a cutoff date, so many days before our meeting. Two business days. If it don't come in, stuff like this, or pictures or anything, we're really not what to look at because this way, we don't have time to look at it, study it, to really understand it. You know, we appreciate people giving us stuff, but when you come to the meeting, we don't have time to really study it. And this is why we do this. That's why I told them, put it aside. Don't let it make their decision right now. Listen, what's going on out here.
You're more than welcome to speak to it.
Okay.
Yeah, speak on it.
Oh, I was going to anyway.
Yeah, you can
Yeah.
speak on it.
Oh, I'm going to.
That's to sit down.
That way you'll have this, so you'll know what I'm saying, so you can verify it. Andy Lyons, to live in Marion. What I handed you that you can't read is an analysis from an appraiser. And we've talked, as a matter of fact, I talked to an appraiser today out of Chicago that did an appraisal for Delaware County. And what you have in this packet that you can't read is an appraisal that's done for 10 sites in Kentucky, 1 in Rhode Island, 1 in Texas, and 1 in Anderson. There are 14 parts to the study. This is an 11-page summary. The full study is 95 pages. I gave you the summary. And in the summary, in those 14 different cases, there were either significant property loss to or value lost to the homeowners that abut to solar farms and or payments to those particular residents. Now, there's 2 reasons why they would pay the residents. So they wouldn't come to places like this and throw a fuss. Or because they know that there's property value degradation. There are no other options. Those are the options when a company pays residents that abut to solar farms money. Some of these are upwards of $50,000. These are not insignificant sums of money. In this that you can't read, show us that in 2 or 3 places, 300 feet were the setbacks. That's what 4 is. 15% decrease in value of homes. One place had an assessment readjustment because of their location to solar farms. Their assessed value on their properties went down 30%. Now, our solar friends here are going to say, well, we have no studies that suggest that there's property value degradation. Well, that's false. And the reason why they say that is because all the ones they really want to cite are done or sponsored by them. There is no doubt in this particular document that's 11 pages in which you can't read is the fact that on average, we're talking 14 to 15% in many of these cases, the median loss of value. We're not talking a couple $100. We're not even talking a couple $1,000. We're talking in some cases $30 and $40 and $50,000. Another place in here, they had to people when they found out were contracted or they were wanting to buy land and they found out a solar facility was going in, they backed out of their leases to get away from it. This could be the most egregious decision that Grant County has ever made. And the fact that it's being run through, because Steve, I'm not really on you because you just kind of got in. This thing has been bullied through. Let's just be honest. I'm an umpire. I just call them as I see them. This has been bullied through. Not by you guys, but it's been bullied through. And the reality is, this is going to affect people that live next to, and eventually it's going to affect us all. Because at some point, if those, when they become inoperable, if those can't be cleaned up, guess who's going to pay the bill? It's not going to be me because I'm going to be dead most likely because I'm old like most of you are. But my grandkids and my kids and your grandkids and your great grandkids that are going to stay here, they're the ones that are going to have to deal with this. This is the most important decision Grant County has ever made. No question about it. I want you guys as a collective group to have the guts to say, we're not recommending 4. There are no property allowances in 4. None. 300 feet setback is ridiculous. Is utterly ridiculous. Look, I'm all for property rights. I mean, I'm basically almost a libertarian. But I watched the commissioners deny a request for a guy who wanted to start a garage in the country out on 26 by Hemlock.
Your time's up.
And they denied it because one person said, no, I don't want it.
Time's up.
It's ridiculous. Say no to 4 and send it back to the commissioners and make them be the ones responsible.
We got 4 minutes.
Won't take long. On 4, on the drainage,
Tell us who you are.
Kenny Cates,
Okay.
I'm on the drainage board.
Okay.
Repair the project, repairs by the project owner to the nearest original condition. Over north of Swayze, we got 2 tile that's 24-inch or better that was put in 1896 to 1900. We don't want them repaired. And these people's going to want to be over these tile, okay? Because the power lines is right above them. So we need to change that in 4 some way. All right, so that the drainage board has power to control, get the ditches fixed. And then Oak Hill took and put one right over the solar panels right over a county tile. I guess, I don't know who fixes it when the tile breaks down. But we've got to look out for our drainage on our existing tiles as well as above ground.
I'm Ed Blinn, Grant County farmer, and I manage over 2,000 acres here on the east side of Marion. Drainage is our most important factor we have here on the east side. As you know, most of Grant County was swamp at one time. And I have very spaciously looked at this solar panel they just put up at Gas City. I've been there virtually every day because I'm remodeling a house across the road and watched them put in this solar system over there. Indiscriminately, when they set out with a plan to put in a solar field, they give a shit less what is underground. Those posts go in an exact spot on a grid at a exact height so that these solar panels could follow the sun. It's not like the old kind where they just had to point them in the right direction. Anytime that we have in the eastern Grant County, which is gently rolling, we have numerous court and county tiles running everywhere. That is just a small fraction of the amount of drainage that we have in our farms. If these solar panels companies could go in and destroy the drainage in Grant County over the next 20 or 30 years, because they will not drain once you destroy these field tile. On top of that, anybody at a higher elevation, their water flows through these fields if you're downstream. How are these people going to divert their water through a hill that's 20 or 30 feet high to drain their farms after they put these panels in? Our surveyor's here. He should be well aware of what damages they could do. People need to totally reject these panels from Grant County. The money looks great. Figure what it costs to redrain all these farms in 10, 20 years from now, because they will ruin them. Thank you.
David Kane from Marion, Indiana. Probably some of you recognize my name from a few emails that I've sent out in support of ordinance number 7 and a passage of that. So I won't get into that, since several of you have probably read those statements. But not less than 2.5 hours ago, I had a discussion with Steve Smithley. Now, I don't know, a lot of you here in the county probably don't know who Steve Smithley is, but he's the head of the Redevelopment Commission. Not one person has approached him about installing solar panels within the city of Marion at old factory locations, the Malleable, Active Products, Foster Forbes. The list goes on and on. We have a lot of locations within the city of Marion that can be developed into solar farms, saving precious farmland. I'm also a member of the city council. So some of you are saying, well, what fight do you have in this? Well, let me give you my background, because I was raised on a farm. I farmed for many, many years myself. My dad was a farmer. My grandfather was a farmer. My great-grandfather was a farmer. We still have farmland in our family. I consider an agricultural business.
I work for a local fuel petroleum business. I deliver a lot of fuel to a lot of you farmers that are sitting in this audience. So I know some of you firsthand. So I think that as representative, you're either elected or you're appointed. I think you need to listen to your constituents. Here they are. They're speaking. They're standing up for their rights. And I think you need to listen. Notes here. And I mentioned earlier, I've been to every one of these meetings. If I couldn't attend the commissioners meeting, I know my wife attended. And Andy, I don't always agree with your political statements, but you did a good job tonight. So I think you need to listen to that. Common sense tells you that if you have a solar farm in your backyard, your property values are going to decrease. I mean, that's just common sense. So I urge you to make a wise vote tonight. Listen to your constituents. I'm still waiting for a single person. Well, I guess we did have one single person from Grant County several meetings ago speak up in favor of solar panels. One person. Everybody else from Grant County is saying no. And so I urge you to reject this, send it back to the commissioners, and we'll go from there. And I would urge, if there's a chance for a moratorium, that you do that. 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road, when these solar farms will eventually go in, what will we have learned in those 4 or 5 years? Something may be very bad. So I think we need to step back, watch what other counties do, what they do, and make a very wise decision. Because I think Andy is right. This is one of the decisions that will affect this county for literally generations. Thank you.
Julie Hartman. Someone had made the comment that you can do whatever you want on your land. And I was just thinking there could be all kinds of board meetings and other meetings going on in our county tonight, but I don't think anybody's going to convince this board that you can do whatever you want on your land. I've been to a few meetings and I listened to what you can do on your land, sometimes what you can't do on your land. All land is zoned for something. If you want to do something on your land it's not zoned for, then you can ask for a special exception. And I just kind of thought I would bring that up because it's my understanding that even the state code explains what you can and what you can't do on your land.
I'm gonna have to move this. Okay, I'm Linda Morgan. Hey, we ran out of room. Oh. Okay. Unfortunately, I'm not a good speaker. I'm a little better at writing. I want to read you real quick a comment I had made on Facebook. Can't believe I'm on Facebook. So much to say about this. One of my questions is why can't solar be placed on those properties that are not suitable for farming? And that's been addressed. Grant County has several sites for manufacturing that needs cleaned up and can't be used for anything else. And why would we use the land we grow our food on when other properties go unused? Also, once the solar farm is no longer usable, the panels are removed and hopefully recycled, but there are cables and cement under the ground that will not be removed. And I have been told that by the companies. I would love to see solar used to provide protection for our cars in parking lots. There's, I think the one I can remember is, I think it's Kaiser Permanente in Colorado, uses solar panels as like a carport setup. Why can't we do that? The power created by this would help off-put electric costs used at our warehouses and factories instead of going out of state. Maybe reduce their bills. I've always believed solar and wind power have an important place in our world. My concern is about the loss of places to grow our food. And that includes, where'd it go? And that includes the grain that feeds our animals. I know there's some vegetarians around here, but they might want some plants grown too. And I spoke about this before. There's been numerous reports about China purchasing farmland in the United States, apparently to feed their own country. When you follow the money trail for the solar farms, it looks like China is the backer for most of the solar farms that exist now and the ones that are wanting to move into our county. Is that, do you know who your investors are? And any of them local? So any benefit that, no, no. No, I'm asking who the investors are because they're the ones that get the most benefit.
Time's up.
Okay. I got a lot more.
Ed, you want to talk?
Nobody else. I'll wind it up. I'm Ed Hartman. I'm from Fairmount, Indiana area, but I live outside of town. Now, one thing we touched on very briefly here is this ordinance is for the unincorporated area. It affects the people in this room, possibly. We don't know where these things are going. Everything's been a big secret. If everything's got to be a big secret, maybe there's a little something wrong with it. Maybe we ought to be asking some more questions. Another thing is, how much money are we going to get from this if they actually come in? Now, my accountant tells me that machinery depreciates in value, has a lower book value each year. It'll probably also have a lower assessed value each year. If they start out paying one number on property taxes, they're going to end up paying near nothing in 30 years. Is that being considered? What about tax abatements? They may want those too. That's the county council that'll have to decide that. But if you give them tax abatements in the early years when they would be paying more taxes
and you're not collecting them then, you're not going to collect them in the later years either when the thing's depreciated and it's changed hands multiple times. One thing not mentioned too often is the 13,000 acre solar farm, the Mammoth Solar Farm, one in up north in Indiana. It's already been sold. It's not even done. It's not even hardly started. There's big money to be made building solar farms. They'll exhibit it here. They'll throw money around. They'll pay 3 times market rate for land for 30 years. They've got money, obviously. And they get big tax credits from our federal government pushing this Green New Deal. This Green New Deal is a disaster. It's already being found out what a disaster it has been in European countries such as Germany. 22 years, Germany has invested heavily in renewable energy, wind and solar. They can only get it up to 40% of their capacity. It's unreliable. It's inefficient. It doesn't work at night. It doesn't work on an overcast day unless you count 10 to 25% output on an overcast day as working. I don't consider that working. Electrical grid is something we all use. It's something we really need. Also, farm ground is something we really need. By the year 2050, it's estimated there'll be 2.2 billion more people in this world. And we want to consume farmland at a rapid rate in this country. That doesn't make sense. They're going to be looking at us to feed the world and other countries as well. Farming's going to be playing a big part, and giving up good farmland like we have in Indiana, that doesn't make sense. Maybe it makes sense to give up land in Arizona or Mexico, maybe. But still, you're looking at something that doesn't work at night and doesn't work on cloudy days. Doesn't make sense. This ordinance is for the people in the unincorporated area. Now, there's 28,000 people in Marion. Probably none of them are here. So the commissioner should really, I think, give heavy weight to what the people in this room want. The people in this room care about their neighbors. I don't know that a solar farm's coming in near me. I kind of doubt it. I'm not real close to the grid. But regardless, I'm here for my neighbors, my friends, families in this community. Nobody wants to have the thing that they've worked for all their life possibly devalued. Their home in the country. A lot of people work hard for that, to get out of the city. They don't want to watch it wrecked. They like their view. Out here in Indiana, we're not real hilly. You can see for a long ways. From where I live, I can see Fairmount. And it's a lot further than a 13, 20-foot setback. If y'all remember, the ones that have been here since November, we talked about a 1450-foot setback in the November meeting. And then we reduced it to 1320. We talked about that each month. That's what the people in this room wanted. They didn't want 250. They didn't want 300. They wanted a quarter-mile setback because you can see a mile out here, no problem. So those are some of the things. The ordinance that we brought from Adams County and changed to Grant County had very few changes in it. We added no slave labor because we thought that was important. I'm appalled that there's still slave labor anywhere. Okay, we think that's important. It's not in draft 4.
It's in draft 7. We also thought it was important that recycling was done at the end of the panel's life. Only one company is currently doing recycling in the US. That's First Solar, but they'll only recycle panels they made. They won't recycle anybody else's panels. Recycling is difficult. It's expensive. It's not salvage where you go in and get the steel or the aluminum or the copper wire or anything else that's useful and dump the rest. Dumps are filling up in California with solar panels. They've been doing it for a longer period of time out there, and they're already having trouble with the chemicals leaching out of them and contaminating groundwater. The way this country is going at this solar, we can't even begin to throw them away. Our dumps will be all filled in 20 years. And then we'll be dumping them in third world countries. It's not a good plan. This Green New Deal is not a good plan, and it needs to be resisted in our county, just like it's being resisted in other counties. You can see it around Madison counties resisting it. They sued, the residents sued to the Indiana Supreme Court. They lost, but they tried. Delaware County, they got an attorney. They got a moratorium. We need a moratorium too, because we seem to be a long ways apart. Now, the area plan can recommend a moratorium, just like they can recommend that draft 4 be rejected. They can recommend that, and the commissioners can act on it if they so desire. It's up to them. We all knew we'd get here sooner or later. We'd get to where the 3 commissioners are going to decide. So we've really got to appeal to them. Think about this. And don't forget, solar's not a good business for Grant County. Farming is your best business in Grant County. It is huge. He talked about spending $2 million planting acreage. That money stays in this community, used time and time again, has a multiplier effect. All electricity sold by the solar companies, that money leaves town. Lease payments to landowners, we don't even know where they are. Some might not even be in this state. This whole thing has secrecy surrounding it, and that's been a problem from the beginning. Now, Steve, you weren't here. You're not responsible for this. But the team that developed this ordinance, draft 4, did not do like the APC did. They did not try and reach out to the public, have public meetings, get public input, and find out what's important to the people in this community. No, they formed a team of Commissioner Bardsley, Tim Eckerly of Economic Development, who wanted these solar farms, Charity Bailey of Economic Development. What kind of a team is that? They didn't represent you people out here. Commissioner Bardsley should have represented you people out here, but they came up with draft 4, and it does not protect you. Anyway, I urge you all to vote down draft 4 and to recommend a moratorium and vote for it tonight. Thank you all.
At this time, I close the open meeting to the public speaking. Before we go into any voting and doing anything, Bob Boswell has asked me if he'd like to talk and say something. Bob? Okay. Okay, it's going to be part of the vote. He said, go ahead, Bob. Yeah, go ahead, Robert.
So I'm Robert Kaus. I'm from Jonesboro. And during a lot of this, unfortunately, because of my work schedule, I was on second shift and I wasn't able to come, but I kept up on all the ordinances and the different meetings and trying to get some input and feedback. And I went out and looked at a solar farm. And 7 is not the answer and a moratorium is not the answer, but 4 sure isn't either. But like we've done in the past, and I'm the youngest one up here, but I've served on this board twice now. And I've went through multiple different things, wind farms, CAFOs, you name it. I've sat here through a lot of it. And each time Grant County has voted them down, kept them restricted, kept them out. We don't want it. We don't want to do it. That's fine. But each time also we're missing an opportunity to where we could have done something to do it right and to allow the development that works within our county. But our answer always has been, and this is like deja vu. I remember sitting through these twice. This is the third time round, and it's the same conversations that we have. And I'm not saying everything's not, it's an unfounded concerns about property rights and things of that nature. I'm just saying we are not accepted of anything on this. 7 is a moratorium. Flat out it is. With the setbacks, you will never get a company to come in here and even remotely look at doing what they need to do that. I understand. I'm not saying that's wrong or right. I'm not saying that's wrong or right. That's it. That's what the county, that's what you people want to come up and ask for. But what I'm saying is at a certain point, we have to start looking at what we can do also to develop, because here in a short time frame, and it's a Purdue University study, you want people to read. I read just to make sure I have an encompassing of it. I read the Rochester tax study on that one too, and that was one of the ones that says, hey, in these areas it's a 16% loss in property tax. So I read everything everyone gives me. But there's a university study from Purdue that says we will have shortages in Indiana for energy. So we have to make that capacity up somehow as a state. Somehow, whether it's solar, whether it's wind, whether it's coal, I don't care. Put a nuclear power plant up somewhere. But it's going to have to go somewhere. And any of those options, I don't think anyone here would accept. Okay, well, that's the first time I've heard that, but hey, that's cool. We could discuss that if it was ever an option.
Do you want to answer a question? Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Question was, if I'm capturing it correctly, I'm just going to face this way for the mic, where the power goes for projects just like this. And the answer is the same for any utility scale project, whether it's nuclear, solar, wind, coal, anything. You tie into the grid where you are, and the electrons you put onto that line travel along that line, along the interconnected grid. So a lot of the power is going to be used before it leaves, a few counties radius. I hear all the time, I think it comes up a lot, that this power is going to New York. I can't imagine how that would be possible, that it would get all the way to New York without being used first. But the fact is, we are on an interstate grid amongst, states connected to Indiana. You got Ohio, you've got Pennsylvania, you've got West Virginia, you've got Virginia. But the question on whether or not power from here is going to get that far, I really doubt it. The fact is, power we put on the grid right here, the grid is kind of like a reservoir, like a tub, if you can imagine it, of power from thousands of different sources. When you flip on a light switch in this room, you might be getting power from 10 different plants, and you don't know which ones they are. It's not possible to track where it is. But the fact is, there is a power need. There will be more power need in the future. And projects like this help the grid to diversify so that you don't have such an impact of outages and grayouts and issues in the future. But power generated locally and entering the grid locally will somewhat be used locally. There's just no way to track exactly how far it goes. Sure.
So to pick up where I left off, unfortunately, this is like deja vu for me. And the only thing I have to say is, again, I don't believe 7 was the proper ordinance. I don't believe 4 is the proper ordinance, but that's where we are. But at some point, we have to be a little more accepting and bend on the commissioner's side, on our side as a county, or we will miss out eventually on something. There are businesses now that are talking about coming into places, but when they want to come in, they want to be able be next to a solar facility, or they want to be able to put their own solar facility in. And if you set up an ordinance that's that restrictive that would prohibit that from coming in, you won't get that job or those businesses. To me? Okay, sure. I'll tell you right now, it's probably zero currently. But as this progression moves forward, because you said it yourself, Ed, the green, they're wanting to go green. They're wanting to have this opportunity to do it. And if I honestly would probably say it's nothing at this point. That's just my opinion. I can't speak. Well, I can't speak for what they said. I'm just telling you what my opinion. But eventually there's going to come a time when it's going to be these types of projects are tied to businesses that are going to want to come by, and they will completely bypass Grant County. You heard my opinion. You heard my opinion. I'm all of the above, everything. I'm just saying at some point in time, we have to be willing to accept something to come in, and that's going to require us to give up farmland. Well, because that's what's here right now. We turned down wind farms years ago. So, and I can't speak for them, but my assumption is that the scale that they're wanting to produce to make it profitable for them, it is much larger than any sites that we have potentially, as far as a dilapidated manufacturing thing. But to sum it up for me, all I'm saying is I've lived through this, and it's like deja vu again. And each time something comes up and we're so adamantly against it that either we create an ordinance that's a moratorium or we just give it a moratorium, one of the two. And if we continue to do this and trudge down this path, we will eventually not have anything of that opportunity that could have came to us. I respect everybody's. I mean, I have family that has farms. I have family that have woodland, and I've grown up hunting and running dogs. That's what I did. And I agree with you. To be able to, you bought a piece of property, you look out there and you see the sunrise every morning, and to have some solar panels and stuff sitting there that potentially you may see because of dead trees or whatever we have that's happened on the one, that definitely ruins that view. I get that. I understand. But there's always a give and take on anything that's any kind of progression. There's always a give and take. And it's a balancing act between keeping what you have and being able to progress forward. I deal with that in Jonesboro. It's a very big balancing act between trying to keep that homey feel of Jonesboro, but still progress forward. And that's where we are in Grant County. So I respect that. I'm just saying we have to keep in mind that at some point in time, we have to be flexible. That's all I have. That's absolutely true. I agree with you. But it takes land of some sort to make that power.
Technology may make all the difference in the power.
It's still going to have land somewhere to put it on.
I gave you an alternative. I gave you an alternative, right in the city of Marion. All these factories. Nobody's taking us up on it. There's an answer. Too much work. That's why. Here's the board. Here's the board. You guys are the ones that.
But we have no say over Marion.
Come up with solutions. You have solutions here. You can come up. You can amend your draft. Here's the board.
We can't.
We
current-
can't. Only thing we
We
can
just
do
discussed that.
tonight, as your chairman, we can either accept or reject. We did go through steps and change things to try to tell the commissioner what we want. And they sent us a draft. What, yeah. And so we're at the point now, only thing left for us tonight is accept draft 4 or reject it. That's the only thing we can do tonight. You know, I know the people have spoken, and we'd love to do what the people want, but that's all we can do tonight, is accept it or reject it. And it's up to the commissioners what they do. Because I've said that from day one, before I was chairman, we could do this, come up with an ordinance, but it could be thrown in the trash. Commissioners have the last say so, and that's where it's coming to.
So again, just to refresh, we can either accept and then it becomes ordinance. We can reject it and then it goes back to the commissioners.
Yeah.
And they will make their vote, or we can do nothing and then it'll go and become ordinance.
Well, if you do nothing, yeah.
Yes. If we do nothing, it becomes ordinance. If we accept it, it becomes ordinance. If you reject it, it goes to commissioners.
They changed it. I don't think they're gonna make any amendments. Once either one. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I make a motion, we reject draft 4.
Not right now. I'll take that in motion for later. Right now, we're just going in number 5, and Bob's gonna talk here.
Okay, well, we're at the point, I would think, where it's up to us to discuss
Can't
this
hear,
kind
can't
of
hear.
thing, and there are sentiments each way that are being expressed. Can you hear out there? Yeah, okay. So is there anybody else on the board that has sentiments to be expressed? I want to say, friend, that we need to respect what Mr. Kaus has had to say. Have to get this up here. Now we can hear me. I'm old, guys. It's kind of hard. But I think we need to respect what Mr. Kaus has to say. I do not agree with where he is, but please don't disrespect his opinion. It was well spoken, it was well stated, and he certainly has a point to be considered, I think. Is there anybody else that wants to speak? If not, because again, I'm old, I have drafted comments that I wanted to make tonight. So if you'll bear with me, I'll read, where I am coming from and what I think the board should do. Anybody got these kind of glasses? These are good glasses. Whereas the process developing the ordinance before us was flawed and purposefully dismissive of the Area Plan Commission, who commonly has responsibility of development. Whereas the ordinance before us was drafted by a clandestine group of vested stakeholders who have no ethical or legal standing to do so. Those stakeholders who have for months opposed the commissioner's position on solar energy have been treated with rude, dismissive, and indifferent behavior by the self-anointed spokesperson for the county commissioners. The ordinance before us shows little to no regard to protecting the rights and concerns of non-participating residents, including but not limited to property values. Protection of citizens' rights with regard to land use is a primary responsibility of Area Plan and is not taken lightly. The ordinance before us was developed with input from a single county commissioner. A second commissioner twice voted to support an ordinance proposed by county and is replaced by Mr. Wright. The third county commissioner, the Honorable Mr. Burton, will be replaced in January by a newly elected person. Considering these facts and the magnitude of impact of the impending ordinance adoption, a pause to allow all county commissioners, current and newly elected, time to hear and evaluate evidence from all sides is imperative. The ordinance before us removes oversight by the Board of Zoning Appeals, and it keeps for the county commission and is kept for the county commissioners themselves. This act of usurpation is not of common practice. The ordinance before us strips the fee-setting responsibility from Area Plan Commission and again puts it as a prerogative of the county commissioners. While points 7 and 8 are questionably legal, they illustrate the dismissive disrespect for sister agencies in the county commissioner's office. Legal is not necessarily right or ethical. The ordinance drafted by Area Plan Commission was totally disregarded by the county commissioners. Such rude and despotic behavior is duly noted. Agencies granted great authority are accompanied with even greater responsibility to those granting the authority. In America, the grantors of authority are we the people. Arrogant disregard of the people risks severe consequences. Therefore, the area plan should, 1, reject the ordinance before us for the reasons noted above and other flaws not specifically noted, such as failure to follow prescribed procedures. And 2, request a moratorium to allow face-to-face discussions of disputed issues, time to heal adversarial relationships caused by the mishandling of this issue, time to involve all commissioners, current and new, in all sides of this issue, to be consistent with county commissioners' past action on other hotly contested issues, i.e. wind farms and contained animal feeding operations. And lastly, follow the wisdom of adjacent counties, Delaware and Madison, currently in moratorium over said same solar energy. So that is my recommendation to this board. And I think it would be appropriate to adopt this. The reason we go through this is not to point fingers necessarily at anyone, but part of the process in the exchange of information is when something is rejected or changed, it is to be highlighted and sent back to the receiving agency or to the sending agency. That did not happen. We sent to them, to the commissioners, a draft 7, we're calling it. They did not do anything with that, did not send back reasons for rejecting it, and sent us back instead what they did. So the reasons that I went through all the whereases and all that kind of stuff is I think that dots the I's and crosses the T's for us. We are sending back, hopefully, a rejection of what they've done, and we've given reasons why. The process, unfortunately, has overshadowed the issue. We have gotten to the point where the two sides have for months now, two sides being you folks out there and the commissioners, have been riveted on extreme ends. And there has been no face-to-face opportunity for us to come together and to discuss what our differences are. Now, quite frankly, I am not against solar power. I think, though, that solar power needs to be managed and it needs to be done in a way that our people are protected out here. But we haven't had an opportunity to sit down. You folks haven't had the opportunity. Your leadership have not had the opportunity to sit down with people who see it diametrically 180 degrees differently and have a discussion. The moratorium provides that opportunity for us to do. So if nothing else, just for the sake of decency, we are requesting that the commissioners grant a temporary moratorium to give us time to heal, to give us time to sit and talk to one another and to see if there isn't some kind of a middle ground that we could all agree upon. Even though we want to be, we want no solar for many people at all. Somebody else wants it to be totally open and totally liberal. There's got to be some middle ground. There's got to be, as Mr. Casas talked about, some give and take. There needs to be an opportunity for all of us to put down our guns, lay this thing down, and treat one another with just common respect and decency. And unfortunately, that has not happened. I do not think that you were the adversarial in their adversarial role to begin with. I think you've been placed in that kind of a situation. So we'd call upon the commissioners, please, put the guns down, give us an opportunity to sit down and talk. These folks over here, as I said earlier, I was asking, are you residents of Grant County? And they are not. However, don't dismiss those folks. They are knowledgeable and they're just doing their job. They are the hired, quote, guns for solar energy. And they're good. I mean, I think you would have to agree that they have a lot of information. Wouldn't it be nice if we could have come in and be able to sit, together? Unfortunately, they did come in and they sit with, quote, the leadership of Grant County. Now, that leadership in Grant County, they didn't sit with us. Okay. We were excluded from the process. And that then is what has set up the adversarial relationship between the commissioners, the Board of Zoning Appeals, and area plan. And we're supposed to be sister agencies. We're supposed to be colleagues. We're supposed to work together. And unfortunately, that has not happened. And you guys have been left out of the loop. So let's have a moratorium. Let's request the moratorium. Doesn't have to be a long thing, so we can sit down and face to face talk about our differences of opinion and see if there isn't some kind of middle ground that could be reached. So to that end, I think it would be time for us to have a motion to either accept or reject, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Maynard. Yes, I do. Listening to Mr. Bothwell's points, there's a lot of truth of what I've kind of come to find out since I've been on here a whopping 46 days, 47 days, I think. And however, some of the language that was in the motion or making that kind of motion, I can't agree with. And so while I think there is room for improvement on Ordinance 4, I do believe if the motion is a moratorium or some of the language that was in the motion or that would be put in the motion that Mr. Bothwell was talking about, I would have to abstain. So just letting everybody know that right off the get-go. And I would need to do that just to give me more time to do what I do. And one of the things that I'm wanting to do is I would like to have a solar panel. And because I've asked everybody to send me their top 10 concerns, and I would like to give the solar companies more of a chance to talk. We gave, now hang on just a second. Hang on. Okay. I want them to be able to address what your concerns are. Now, you can laugh all you want. I've been at it 46 days. I know many of you have been at it for a year. Okay. But I haven't. And guess what? It comes down on me. So I need more time. and I want to hear them. I've talked to 3 of the companies that I'm aware of that is looking at Grant County and shared with them that I would like to do this. I'm not going to send them our questions that you have or your concerns. I think there was a presidential debate that was questioned on that, and I'm not going to do that. Okay. So they aren't getting anything, but I am going to give them enough information. Just as, we asked the attorney tonight, he wasn't the guy to answer my questions. I get that. I want to make sure they have the people that can answer our questions. So that's what I would like to do. I think it's going to be at Marion High School auditorium. So I have a real good PA, and I do think you guys did a great job tonight. We just got to learn how to talk into a mic, right? And I just think that would do. And what I want to do that before the 45-day time is up. We may come out seriously. I'm listening tonight. I wrote down every comment. I don't know if you noticed I was up here writing every comment that was being made. Moratorium is a common word. Okay. And I get that. And I want to take a look at that. But I also know once something goes into moratorium, if you don't set a time frame on it, it'll never come out because nobody wants to deal with it again. I think we need to make sure that we're doing the right thing for the community. And again, a lot of questions come up tonight. How much money is it? I can honestly tell you, I don't know. I really don't. And I didn't want that to really sway my understanding of what was going on in our county with the farmers. I wanted to hear from the farmers first. And I'm looking out at the audience. I've come to your homes. I've visited your farms. I've been driven around. I went and visited solar farms. There were some things that I have great concern on, and I talked to them about that. And I want to make sure that our ordinance can be enforceable. I mean, enforceable. So that's where I'm at. And I didn't want to do that during the roll call because I don't think that's fair, but I did want to go ahead and do that to let you know where I'm at as a commissioner. And I agree with Mr. Kane. This is probably the biggest vote that I've ever done, even being on the council for 12 years at Marion. So it's a huge decision. And I do want to make sure I'm representing everyone. I just got to make sure that that's what that is. So thank you for your time.
I would like to respond if I could. Yeah. Mr. Wright, I understand then that you are in support of rejecting the issue that is before us so that we can get to the 45 days, because if we accept,
I believe the motion was going to come out for a moratorium.
well, no, that's
And
a
I'm not.
request. No, there is no motion for that. That's a request.
It's a request, and I'm not going to be a part of it.
Okay, that's fine. You
Does,
don't
does
have
that
to.
make sense? And
No,
like I say, I'll
I'm
just,
asking, that's not the question. The question is whether we accept or we reject tonight.
and that's
you
why I
would
was
like to
saying
have the
some of
45
the
days,
language in
so
it.
you support the rejection so we can get to the 45-day time frame. Otherwise, if we accept what they have given us tonight, it's over.
It's not over because the commissioners aren't done yet.
Well, it's over. If we accept, it's over.
If you accept,
Yes.
correct.
Right.
Is that not correct? 5 days. We're wondering. He's saying that he would like to have more time to look at this. And the only way for us to get more time is
Hang on just a second.
Yeah, you're in the trick box now because the process has gone through. You guys have sent the recommendation. The commissioners have sent an amendment back. So the only options are 4 and 7 now. I mean, right. If it's accepted tonight, it's over.
Okay. But if it's rejected tonight, we get
Goes back to their
the commission.
45 days,
45
correct.
days to respond.
Correct.
So that's, that's where I think that
Well, respond being.
that you need to
accept.
Right.
need to decide. You don't want to If you truly want more time to look into it, then we have to reject tonight in order to give you that kind of time.
Yeah, and like I say, the language that you were talking, I didn't know that if that was going to be part of the motion.
No, that's not a motion. No.
Or
Okay.
recommendation, because I can't.
Those are reasons why I would be recommending a rejection. The motion is simply going to be to accept or reject. And then I have recommended that we consider moratorium. That's just considered, that's all up to you guys.
Okay.
But we need to have a motion to accept or reject. And in order to do what you're requesting, we have to reject.
Okay.
That's just what I wanted to clarify.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Board else wants to say anything?
Public.
Up to 45. That's right. Yep. That's right. That's right. That's correct. Yeah. It's totally out of our hands. Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Earlier, Andy, I was saying the same thing. We didn't understand that as a board. That's information that sunk into us.
Okay. Anybody else in the board got it?
Based on Steve's comments, I would be extremely disappointed if the commissioners acted before the 45-day period was over.
And I'm one vote. So and again, it's the weirdest thing. Mr. Kane and I was talking about that a little bit. I probably spent more time on the phone with him when I was on the city council and we were opposite parties than any party member that I had, because I respected Mr. Kane and what he did as a businessman. And we made some decisions and we'd talk to each other, and he'd share some information that I didn't have, or I'd share some information that he didn't have. And it was an interesting thing. And that's how you find out things. We could talk. When you got 3 commissioners, you can't talk. It's public. You can't do it. It's open door policy at that point. So I really can't talk to my colleagues and find out exactly what they're thinking. I can't. It's a weird deal. I've never faced this before. So I hope you understand where I'm coming from, that like I say, I want to make sure I'm doing the right thing for our community. And I know what you guys think is the right thing. Let me verify that. Let me verify that.
Steve,
Okay.
I've told you more than once, you're a breath of fresh air with the fact that you will listen and communicate with us. And I would hope that that continues in commissioners' meetings to give these folks the opportunity, to share, because that did not happen when the ordinance approved by the APC was given to the commissioners. There was absolutely no discussion whatsoever in an attempt to work together. That's where I think the moratorium makes sense, is to start this process over, because the process has not worked as it's been designed from the beginning. Thank you.
Okay. I had a motion to reject. Do I have a second? He made it. And I told him, hold on. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We got a second. Brenda, give us a roll call.
Frankel?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. House?
Yes.
Hicks?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
Wright?
Yes.
Atkins?
Yes.
So. At this time, I make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a motion?
Do we need to make some type of recommendation that we encourage them to do a moratorium? We just voted against it, right?
Yeah, we
Should we make a motion to at least let them consider doing a moratorium further rather than just passing it?
can we?
You can make a motion that we.
That we recommend as a moratorium to give a more.
Yeah. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we encourage the county commissioners, place a moratorium, further research.
Do we have a second on that?
I'll second that. If I may, could we amend that motion and put a timeline into that? 1 year, 6 months, something, so that it doesn't just sit there as somebody noted a little bit ago and it just becomes,
A piece of paper laying out there.
nobody ever visits that. Done. I don't care if you find the other way with it, but I think it'd be good for us to request a moratorium for a year.
Yeah.
Or no more than a year.
I'll amend it to not to exceed more than 1 year.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Roll call?
Rothwell,
Yes?
Rainbow,
Yes.
Reedy,
Yes.
Cottle,
Yes.
House,
No.
Pitts,
Yes.
Todd,
Yes.
Wright,
No.
Atkins,
Yes.
17.
Do I have a motion adjourned?
So moved.
Second. Meeting adjourned.
God, I need to stand up. Okay. Yeah.